What does it take to get your ERP modernization project in tune? That's what we're going to talk about here today. In today's live stream, we're going to talk to a real life customer of an ERP vendor that recently just implemented a new ERP system. And that ERP vendor is also joining us here today, and that is Sanket from Acumatica. So we have two guests joining us today to talk about this real life case study. We have Sanket from Acumatica, who I'll let him introduce himself in just a minute. And we also have Ralph from Eastman Music Company, who I'll let him describe himself in just a moment. So I love doing these live discussions, as everyone knows, but I love doing real life case studies. I love talking to someone who's actually just recently been through the journey. Let's not sugarcoat things. Let's just look at the reality of what it was. You know, what went well? What would you do different? What advice would you give to someone just starting the whole journey? That's exactly what we're going to get into today. And what I thought I'd do before I introduce the guests, I want to read you a little bit about Eastman Music Company. And by the way, another cool thing about having you on here, Ralph, is because I don't know if you know this or not, but this podcast has a strong musical connection with the ground control reference is actually a reference to David Bowie. The company that produces this content is Major Tom Productions, which is another reference to David Bowie. So I feel like, you know, we've got that commonality here, that our love of music, although you're probably more of a legitimate musician than I am. But anyway, I'll introduce Ralph and Sanket in just a moment. But first, I want to just read you a real quick clip from the mission statement of Eastman Music, because this is a good way to sort of unpack who they are. So their mission statement is from the first student instrument to the professional heirloom. The Eastman Music Company of brands, including Eastman, WMS Haynes Co., S.E. Shires, Backen Musical Services, Wilson, Lasky Mouthpieces, Bourgeois Guitars, and now Maltech, is renowned for its dedication to quality, craftsmanship, and innovation. The company is committed to crafting the finest instruments and accessories for musicians around the world. So that's a long way of saying the ERP software industry is enabling music and cool stuff like that. It's not just about technology; it's actually making the world better, because now we have music, all because of Acumatica. Is that fair to say?
That's music only exists in the world because of Acumatica. That sounds correct.
Yeah.
That's very true statement.
Love that as a tagline.
It wasn't for Acumatica and ERP in general, music would not exist. Well, so with that being said, welcome to the show, guys. And Ralph, if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey, how you got to Eastman and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so I am a trained musician. That's what I went to college for. I'm a saxophonist. I still consider myself a saxophonist. I do what I can to keep playing my instrument. If I turned the camera around, you'd see a lot of saxophones in my office as part of R&D of making the instruments. But my role has changed a lot. I was hired as a customer service rep back in 2008, so I've been with the company for quite a while. And I've worked my way up to vice president of operations. Along the way, initially just being someone who was introduced to the concept of ERP at all, working here for the first time to managing our current ERP system, which we moved to Acumatica. We're just 1 month shy of 3 years of go live for our first set of companies. So it's been quite a journey. That first prep in 2002 to switch to Acumatica and get prep for the transition, and then going live. And then since then, we're now operating in 6 countries, 4 continents, through 2 languages, and we've scaled up to 19 actual financial entities in Acumatica to manage our company worldwide. So it's been quite a journey to going from our legacy system to where we are today.
Yeah, and I can't wait to get into it. Like what the journey has been and what some of the challenges were. So we'll ask you a ton of hold all those thoughts, because I've got a lot of questions for you.
Okay,
a little bit about that. And then Sanket, you're from Chief Revenue Officer at Acumatica. Tell us about your background and journey.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So I'm a drummer, but I'm so just to start off with the musical piece, but I wouldn't say I'm anywhere close to how good Ralph is on us from a saxophone, but I'm in the market for new drums. But I've been at Acumatica for almost 5 years now. I live in where our headquarters are, which is just outside of Seattle in Bellevue, Washington. Spent, a lot of time in the software business, spent 14 years at Microsoft in various roles. But, Acumatica is a cloud ERP company. We sell ERP to small and medium businesses around the world. We have over 10,000 customers. We focus on very specific industries like distribution, manufacturing, retail, professional services, and construction. So glad to be here and support the story, but Ralph's story in Eastman Music is quite fantastic. So he'll be the star for sure.
Right. And that's good. And so you've got that musical connection as well. I play bass guitar. I'm not very good, but I do enjoy playing bass. I've got a Fender bass that I love, and I have a couple tattoos that refer to music. But I'm a hack, so I'm not nearly probably as good as either one of you. But I'd love to hear from the audience. A couple questions for the audience as we're doing introductions here. Where in the world are you joining from today? I want to thank the audience for being here. I usually do that up front, and I completely forgot. But thanks to the audience for being here today. Let me know what city and country you're joining from, if you don't mind. We're watching the chat here. We're going to take live questions from you as well. So any questions you have for Ralph or Sanket from a customer or a vendor perspective, please feel free to drop those in the chat at any point. But for now, let me know what city and country you're joining from. Also, let me know what your favorite instrument is. I'd love to hear, just out of curiosity, what's your favorite instrument? Either you play it, or you like to listen to it, or you appreciate it as a listener as well. And I didn't introduce myself. My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, for those that don't know me. So we're an independent tech agnostic consulting firm. We're not affiliated with Acumatica or any other software vendors. So it's a good way for us to just have an objective conversation here. So let's start. You started to go down this path, Ralph.
Yeah.
And you were talking about how it's been quite a journey. If we back up and look at what led Eastman Kodak to pursue ERP modernization, why was that? Why did why did you decide you needed to modernize your ERP systems, and how did you end up choosing Acumatica?
Yeah, not Eastman Kodak, though. Not.
Did I say that?
Yeah,
oh man,
no worries. Eastman School of Music, Eastman Kodak, Eastman Music Company. I'll just clarify for 1 second.
Sorry about that mental block there.
No, you're good. So I started with the company. We were on Mass 90. Oh. And then so it got bought, I guess, by Sage, and then we switched to Sage 100, then Sage 100C. And we were way past its capacities years ago, but we're a little scrappy, a little creative, and we were able to patch it together and but it really felt painful to continue on that system, because it was just so antiquated, and it was trying to work in a modernized system. We were trying to move to a cloud-based structure for where our servers are, and they would break every time Microsoft had like a new security update, and all of a sudden we can't log in, right? And we were also growing. When I started, there was 2 companies. There was Eastman Music Company, our factories in China, and then WMS Haynes, which is a flute manufacturer outside of Boston. That was it. Since then, we've grown to quite a few more companies and locations with distribution and manufacturing. So it started also getting really hard to support the growth of the business that way, because we had so many people that needed to log into the system remotely. And when you're dealing with a remote desktop and security rights and all things like that, we don't have an internal IT support staff here. I am the IT support for Eastman, in that I tell people to email someone, not me. I'm not a technical person. I can trick people to think that I'm a technical person, but I really, truly am not. So we have a managed IT service company that does that work for us. And, it was getting hard for them too, really. Just like every other week, it felt like, that's obviously an exaggeration, but it felt that way, that we were having to Band-Aid and patch up our old system. So, and then it got to where I started learning more about how the databases worked. I have some pretty creative and intelligent people over at some of our other factories that have some Microsoft Access background and some other tools that we've been doing to kind of patchwork the system together, and started diving into some of the data and the way it was stored. I don't know that much about data storage, but it was starting to look very hairy. So it was definitely time for us to move to something different. And that just started my path of going online and saying, which ERP system should we, and then all of a sudden you get flooded with all these companies trying to get your business. So you want me to keep going?
Yeah. So you start researching. So you're not a tech guy. You're an operations guy. You came up in the operations, which I find super interesting. And in some ways, I think that gives you an advantage, whether you realized it or not at the time, because you don't get blinded by the tech. I assume you're more focused on how does the business run,
right?
And as an afterthought, almost, how can I get technology to help me? Which I think is the way to do it. But how did that manifest itself into choosing Acumatica? You had all these different options. You probably got bombarded with sales reps after filling out some forms on websites or whatever. So how did you narrow it down and ultimately choose Acumatica?
So ultimately, going back for just a second, it definitely, I don't have the technical background. So I think that's part of the reason we were able to stay on Sage for so long, because I didn't know any better.
Right.
You know, and where our tech guy was like, this is crazy. I can't believe you're still using it. Nah, I can still enter orders. It's all right.
Yeah, we'll power through.
But we made it work, right? It's kind of joking. It was pretty, I think if looking back, it was impressive what our team was able to do to still work on that system for so long. But yes, we you know, there's a lot of charts and A/B comparison things, and there's actually a lot of resources. If you just I likened it to buying a car, right? You want to buy a car, you put your information in, and then all of a sudden all the dealerships start calling you, and then you could fight them against their price, right? I mean, do that with the ERP system, but it was like all their options, right? Here's what we have, here's what we have, here's what we have. And I'm not completely ignorant to the fact that they exist. So, I mean, I've heard of Oracle and SAP, obviously Sage. And then I learned some other ones, Epicor, Odoo. Like it was pretty quick to like looking blogs and even Reddit and all these, you know, there's online resources. You could pretty quickly whittle down a list between what's popular and what's not, and then the reasons why they're popular. So that was part of it, me just doing some internet research, and then the research.
Google.
Yeah, Google. And then the rest of it was, talking to some of them, they know what they're doing. And they're like, all right, what are your requirements? What do you mean, what are my requirements? All right, well, I got to do this for manufacturing, this for distribution, this for retail, this for online e-commerce. You start learning the list pretty quickly if you're interfacing with these people that sell ERP systems. You learn the lingo pretty quick. And we had a IT support that we worked with Sage. Obviously, we couldn't work with them anymore. We're moving away. They were also helpful too. They're like, well, whatever you guys look for, you're going to need this, 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 this. If you stay with Sage, we can help you. If not, best of luck. So I just used the resources we had. I reached out to our IT support company. They obviously work with a lot of companies and their ERP system support. And they were the ones that actually mentioned Acumatica first, because they had another client that was looking at using Acumatica, and then he said, that guy, that operation guy over there is very much like you, pretty hard, pretty understands what he needs, very direct. So you might want to talk to him and see about what Acumatica is about. Okay. And then I started hearing about Acumatica from other things, because to be honest, I didn't hear about I didn't know about Acumatica before. I never heard of the word before looking for an ERP system. I heard of Sage, Oracle, SAP, and some others, that type of thing. So eventually I came up with the list of non-negotiables. It has to be able to do this. It has to be able to do X, Y, Z. A lot of it was, is it a modern system? Because I was coming off of a non-modern system. Acumatica sells themselves as built in the cloud. No one else is. So they probably, in my head, well, it probably started in a modern infrastructure. So that sounds appealing to a non-technical person versus something like patchworking an old system and trying to make it work in a new one. I already saw that wasn't working well with Sage. I'm sure other companies have addressed that better than Sage. Not Sage. Their product Sage 100 was, did not work in a modern system. So that was appealing. There's a lot of security. Like I wanted easy access and big security. So those are like obviously two things that don't necessarily work together. I travel to our factories in China, our distribution center in Europe, or we have a factory in Switzerland, factory in Canada. There's a lot of traveling. So I needed to be able to log into the system when I'm traveling. I need the people that work at those places to work. I need to know that the system's going to be up and supported 24/7, because we are almost a 24/7 operation. I have very specific manufacturing needs. So I started talking to all of our companies. What do you want? What do you need? What do you want? What does the current ERP system not give? What do you want to have from it? And I started coming up with a list. This is what we need from an ERP system. And from there, it was pretty quick to get rid of most options. Because as I went through our list of needs, some of them, even, like NetSuite, I can remember specifically like, oh yeah, that's going to require customization. So that was like a no-go for me. Like I'm not ignorant. I know we're going to need customizations. We've had customizations right off the bat. But when the conversation on some basic things start out with, that's a customization, all right, you're off the table. So that was a big piece. So that was kind of like the more technical pieces of what I was looking at. And then also pricing, right? Like that at the end of the day, that's what's going to make you say yes or no to a product. Acumatica's pricing structure that is usage, not user-based, was very appealing to me because that was a project I didn't even want to go through. I didn't want to. Some of these companies were like, well, tell us how many finance users you're going to have, how many of this type of user, how many of this. I was like, I don't know. Like the CFO wants to use all of it. I got to get him 3 licenses with one of the companies like this. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But that's the way they were set up. And then I find out Acumatica, they're just like, no, unlimited users. That's awesome. Because then because we are in a growth period, we've acquired companies since moving to Acumatica, and I don't want that to become part of the negotiation. It's like, oh, if we bring you on, we have to add 10 employees. That's going to be an extra $100 a month, $200, whatever. I didn't want to have to worry about per user. If we use the system more, then that's understandable. But to add like 3 people, I don't think it should cost me more. So
especially if they're running reports or they're just accessing information, they're not even doing heavy transactions,
or just entering move transactions through the production workflow. I don't want to think about paying for that person to just do my business processes. A lot of the systems felt very transactional that way, where Acumatica's consumption based pricing was really appealing to just make my life a little easier, to be honest, because it was another project to just figure out what pricing would be with some of these companies.
Yeah.
So eventually I got to Microsoft and Acumatica, just to be specific about what the 2 that I was looking at.
Was it Business Central or Microsoft Business Central or
Business Central? Yeah.
Okay.
And then it became, okay, well, they both they kind of checked all the boxes of things. There was a couple customizations I was going to have to do on both sides right off the bat, regardless. And like if we want to plug into Shopify, that I don't think anyone's doing that natively. So there's still things you're going to have to do with customizations and plugging in, but it was nothing no like key functions that were.
You're not going in and changing the code. You're not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, so we got to the point to where I kind of had to make a gut decision because it was ultimately my decision. Now, I did reach out to all of the relevant people throughout the world of our company. What do you need? What do you want? Then I did the work myself to vet my top choice. I didn't want to have 50 people, 10 people, 5 people make the decision together, because that would have made it take like another year. Right. I said, I'm going to do the work to say what I think is the best choice. Then we're going to present it to each company, and you all have the ability to tell me no, but you have to tell me why. So that was my my plan. That was the way I wanted to attack this. So I got to Business Central and I got to Acumatica, and then pricing. Obviously, that was a piece of it. I really liked Acumatica's pricing structure too. But then our VAR, our ERP person that was working with us to tell us on the product and be our support company through the transition, he said something I think that was really key to me. And just from his perspective, he had worked with Microsoft a lot. He had worked with Acumatica a lot. He said Acumatica, just at least for now, I hope it stays the same, but at least for now, they're a singular focused company. Everyone at the company has one job to make Acumatica better.
Yeah.
I'm talking to you on a program that uses probably 50 different Microsoft products, and their ERP system is just one of them. So support isn't the same when you're going to reach out to Microsoft support versus Acumatica support, or the focus of Acumatica to build this product up. I can't feel guaranteed that Microsoft is going to always look at their ERP system as like the thing to focus on most. And then also just using the products, like demoing them, seeing them. Acumatica just felt more intuitive. It felt very easy to look at and use, and it felt like it would be less of a lift to transition all of the legacy users and new users to Acumatica versus Microsoft, at least the way I thought of it. Yeah. So I said, all right, let's go with Acumatica. Now, everyone else, tell me if there's anything that's a no-go here. And I went with marketing. I went with all divisions of the company, like the corporate part structure of the company, marketing, because we do use the CRM, pieces of the CRM, finance, operations, customer service, production, distribution, warehouse management, all the systems that we need, and the leads of those systems. Everyone else check it and tell me no. And if you want to tell me no, tell me why. No one told me no. So that's why we chose Acumatica.
Not a single group, huh? Because usually,
to be completely fair and honest, the marketing piece, the CRM, isn't that robust. It is kind of designed to work alongside other things, but it does give us the ability to link a contact in an outside marketing product to the contact in Acumatica, which this is huge for us. It's a huge change. I can link that to actual dollar sales in Acumatica. So even though we don't sell direct, I'll get into a specific thing that we created that's awesome. I have a way to capture all the school teachers that our dealers are selling to directly and tie that to dollars within our system. So that's that type of thing that's really, really, really valuable for us. So it's still valuable, but it's not, they weren't like, oh, this is amazing. They're like, I guess we could work with this. But they understood what it was going to, equate to.
Yeah. The integration to the entire operations is a big deal for sure. Yeah. Well, I want to come back. You unfortunately, you answered one question. Now you've created 10 more questions in my head. So I'll come back, and I've got a question for you too, Sanket, here in just a moment. But first, I want to turn to the audience real quickly and just thank everyone who's joining here today and commenting on where they're joining from. Darian's joining on LinkedIn. Good morning. Hemanth on LinkedIn. Good morning as well. We have Jerome joining from South Africa. Thank you for being here today, Jerome. We've got Samantha. Samantha joining from Ontario. Go Sanket and Acumatica. I'm guessing she works for Acumatica.
No,
super fan.
She works for a partner. I know Samantha. Okay. Hey, Samantha. Yeah.
Good to see you. Samantha's a pianist. Okay, and that I tried to play piano once, and it was a disaster. So I admire people who learn how to play piano. Alec joining from Bellevue, Washington, used to play the trumpet. So thanks for being here. Min from Vietnam loves bass guitar. We've got a rhythm section forming here with you.
Yes, we do.
Varun joining from Techmatic Systems in Delaware in India. We have Baham joining from Toronto. Thanks for being here. And then, I'm sorry, I didn't say that name right. Benam, I guess it is. Benam says customization is Acumatica's strength point, which makes the system stand out. So thank you for that feedback there. Rahim, good morning to all. Thanks for being here today. And yeah, I think we've, and then here's a comment here from Yuri. I hope it is, on LinkedIn. Says interesting point about support. As someone who used Microsoft support, I can testify to each word. So thanks everyone for joining here today and commenting where you're at. If you have any questions for the audience or for the guests here today, please feel free to drop those in the chat. We'll pull from those questions here in a moment. But I want to shift gears, and I've got a bunch of follow-up for you, Ralph, on what you just said. Yeah. I want to ask Sanket a question here too. But when you look at companies like Eastman Music, not Eastman Kodak, but Eastman Music, Sanket, I want to share a couple stats here that Ralph shared with you and I yesterday. 200 active users worldwide, roughly, and 1,400 employees. So this isn't, I don't know if you mentioned that before, Ralph. If you did, I missed it, but you have 1,400 employees. So you're not a tiny little mom and pop operation. I mean, you're a good mid-size, solid mid-size company right in the middle, big enough that you could have probably gone with a Microsoft, maybe even like an Oracle or, a NetSuite or whatever, but not so small that, you needed something that could scale, right? And so that's what I find interesting is we're not talking about a tiny little operation here. So from your perspective, Sanket, what makes Acumatica stand out for small and mid-sized businesses like Eastman?
Yeah, so I think a couple things come out. So number one, I think, and Ralph talked about this, just because you're small and mid-sized doesn't mean that you have simple needs. So if you think about Eastman Music, what Ralph talked about is they've got manufacturing centers around the world. They've got distribution centers around the world. They've got customers everywhere. They make their own product. They sell other third branded products. They do it online. They have various methods associated. This is not a simple business. But Ralph also talked about this is, he doesn't have an IT team. And so when you think about software and technology to support the business, especially for companies of this size, you have this sort of traditional make versus buy decision. And if you're an enterprise that's, $10 billion revenue business with a, 300 person IT team, and you can have 50 developers on staff all the time, maybe the decision to make something for your business makes sense. But for other companies that don't have those resources, it's a buy decision. And what you want to do is you want to buy the software and the technology that meets your needs. And understands the complexity of the business. And so what I think Acumatica does, and given our focus on having broad capability of business processes all the way from procurement to customer success, Ralph talked about it, right? It's like the marketing team is involved with Acumatica, the shipping team, the operations, manufacturing, et cetera, all obviously finance, all of these different parts of the company are touching Acumatica. And that's sort of part of how we operate. We want all of these business processes that cross all those departments so they can get value out of the information that an ERP can give. And I think that's pretty unique for Acumatica, that we do that for a lot of our customers. Acumatica will be one of the most important pieces of software that they have, that they use. It's the system of record for their customers, their products, all the things that are going on. And, it'll connect to other systems, but that's an important part of their investment in terms of how they manage their business. And I think that's critical, that we have that functionality all in one piece of software, and that we do 2 releases every year. So every 6 months, it's getting better and continuing to add more functionality for the customers. I think those are the key things that we focus on.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah, thanks for that. And want to also say hello to a few other guests here. Lagos, Nigeria. Opayemi's joining from there. Werner joining from Germany. Thank you for being here today. And then Irina joining from Seattle, and she's also a pianist. People really bring back these PTSD moments of me trying to learn piano. It just really rubbing it in my face here today. Now I'm gonna have to go learn. I'm gonna have to put it on my bucket list to make sure I learn. So I guess coming back to you, Ralph, what were some of the biggest lessons? So you're an ops guy, you're not an IT guy, you have your own your sort of outsourced IT that supports you. You're coming at this from a person that never knew, you didn't know what Acumatica was, you didn't have any ERP or real IT experience, it sounds like. And now all of a sudden you're in charge of leading this initiative within Eastman Music. What were some of the biggest lessons you learned along the way so far?
So, I mean, I don't have IT background, but I did have like some data understanding because of having to use something called Solver, a plugin to pull out data from Sage so that we could get some type of customized consolidated reports using Excel as an interface. So that was that helped me a lot, because I did have at least an understanding of like how to connect the dots between data tables. I didn't know actual SQL join language and stuff like that, but I understood that. I just understood conceptually what was going on in the background. But that product gave me the ability to have an interface that I could use to start doing some reporting. So I have done a lot of reporting based off of my ability to learn Excel and some plugins from Sage. But now transitioning to Acumatica, a big piece, some of the things I learned was, having a singleized system where everything can be housed, where every company could use the same chart of accounts. Like what I learned was just how freeing it was to move from siloed companies to just one system, where I have one account in the US. Some of our major accounts would have huge balances in Sage with each company. And it's so hard to manage their credit limit when it's in three separate companies. Now in Acumatica, is like, oh, I could see their credit limit across all the companies that they purchased from. So just like a kind of like a awakening, or like a nice learning path for me, was just understanding how nice it is to have everything in the same bucket instead of siloed so much. But what I also learned on Acumatica, and something I wish I had learned more about, very specifically, I'm sure other ERP systems have something similarly. In Sage, it was basically a customization to have to do this. But the concept in Acumatica has something called attributes, where I could tag product or anything that fits within a class, a customer, vendors. Aside from the classes, which is Acumatica does things, I could add attributes to so many things. And that really, really opened up our ability to manage the complexity of our business. I don't want to create a separate item class for each brand that we sell. So I just made that be an attribute. Now I have amazing reports that show me brand sales across item classes. I could look at clarinet sales. I could look at woodwind sales. I could look at student woodwind sales. I could look at all student sales. I could look at Eastman Company student sales. So moving to Acumatica gave me this ability to slice and dice our data in so many more creative ways than we were ever able to do in the past. Everything was me dumping data out and using my brain to know what item codes live within a brand and separate that out. So much manual tribal knowledge that I had to have. So now moving to Acumatica, we've been able to add 3 positions that are in support of the data out of Acumatica. I have a reporting engineer, a product data specialist, and someone who specializes in consulting with our manufacturing companies. As she's an employee, but she basically is like the company consultant for manufacturing processes. So that was a really fun part of the journey. The painful part, I think, doesn't go away from anyone, and that's just figuring out all the mappings that are necessary to pull your old information into the new information. But my suggestion on that, you're not asking, but I'll probably answer a question you're going to ask. My suggestion on that is really don't just do a one-to-one mapping from, well, it was this in the old system, now it's going to be this. It was this in the old system, now it's going to be this. Don't one-to-one map stuff. Figure out the structure you want on the other end, on the new system, and then get the 20 things that may fill into one over here, or one thing that fills into 20 over here. Really think of, we vastly simplified our chart of accounts moving to Acumatica, because there was a lot of things that we had to separate in Sage, because that was the vehicle to separate the data. Where Acumatica, there's probably 4 different ways to separate the data. So we didn't need to stuff everything. We didn't need to pick everything into its own little GL. So we went from like, I can't say for sure, but dozens of sales GLs to like 5 for our main products, because it's so easy for us. Because the CFO wants to see the margin. Okay, well, we could do that by item class. We could do that by attribute. We have other ways that we've done that. So he doesn't need to use the sales and COGS GL to look at the margin for every different product. We could just slice the data out that way for him. So we have simplified so many things. So that's like the lesson that we learned, and also something I think we did pretty well, is just don't try and recreate your old ERP system processes. Look and analyze what you think you would want to have set up in the new system, and then make everything translate into that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because, I mean, first of all, most organizations, as it is, underestimate data migration as a whole, just cleaning up what you already have. But then you bring up a really good point, is it's not as simple as saying, okay, now I've cleaned it up, now I'm just going to move it over. It's figuring out how exactly it's going to look in this environment, and asking the tough questions, like why is our GL a mess? Do we want to just replicate that in Acumatica, our new ERP system, or do we want to use this as an opportunity to clean that up? And that takes time, and a lot of organizations don't think about that in time to make it happen.
Yeah,
good stuff. Well, thank you for that. That's super helpful. I want to say hello to Nasir, joining from Tampa Bay on LinkedIn. Thank you for being here today. Fabrice, bonjour from Montreal. Izzy, joining from London, also a pianist. It's really funny. The pianist theme continues. Sanjay says hello all. Love says hello, joining from Nigeria. And then this is from Happiness. Happiness QA engineer from Nigeria. Great conversation. So thanks everyone for joining here today. I'm curious to know too, just from the audience, if you had ever heard of Acumatica prior to this conversation. I'm just curious. If you have, let me know what you think about it. If you haven't, I just would be curious to know. And by the way, just as a side note, I've got a follow-up question for you here, Sanket, here in just a moment. But before I do that, I'm going to put up a QR code. If you want to learn more about Acumatica, we are not affiliated with Acumatica, but I did want to share some information about them. So if you scan this QR code, we'll include a link below too. Scan that QR code. It'll take you to where you can learn more about Acumatica. If you're just doing some research, you want to learn more about it, read some of the case studies and white papers and all the good stuff they have on their website. You can check it out there. So if you try that too, you can also get a 15% discount on your subscription if you do end up deciding at some point to buy the software. So use that QR code to learn more, and you can also get a demo and do all that good stuff there. So I'll leave that up for a moment, but in the meantime, I have another question for you, Sanket. So Ralph was just talking about data mapping and data migration. And I know you often emphasize data readiness. Can you explain from your perspective, more from the vendor perspective, why is it such a critical foundation for ERP success?
Yeah. So the sort of way I like to start about talking about data readiness, especially from an ERP perspective, is to think of a business and the data as the digital twin. Sort of the easiest way to think about it. And a lot of our customers, their businesses are in the physical world. They're a manufacturer, they're a distributor, they're in construction, they're moving something physical. And when I talk to some of our customers, I ask them, imagine for a moment if you had a digital twin of your business and all of that, like almost like the Matrix, right? Like not that we're trying to create the Matrix, but just imagine, you can imagine if your business was a twin and you had all of that stuff digitized. And if you had all of your employees who have all this great information about what's happening with customers or partners or the business or the products, have access to all of that digital twin, a complete replica of the business in a digital sense, with its relationships, with its status, with the vectors of where things are moving. Imagine the speed of decision making, the impact of that decision, and how much more competitive you would be, right? Because every business is trying to be competitive, figure out what's going on. The world is not standing still on all these different dimensions. So you've got to figure out, what are we going to do to continue to move forward? And every business every day wakes up thinking about that, right? And so that's how I sort of broadly think of it, is sort of what's that digital twin. And so from an ERP perspective, I feel like Acumatica plays a very, very big role in creating that digital twin view of a business. We have product information, SKU information, inventory, manufacturing processes, employees, customers, partners, all this data that's in there. And it's all available real time on any screen. And so you could sort of look at this and say, hey, that's a really interesting way to think about it. But obviously, the information of that digital twin is only as good as the data that's in there and the relationships between that data. And so that's a critical part of the data readiness portion, right? And Ralph did, I think, a really nice job of talking about the chart of accounts and the mappings and the different ways and how to use attributes. It's not just having the data, which is, binary pieces of information. It's the relationships of those, it's the tags that you put on them, and it's how then you build the business processes so that you get information of that data, that you can actually do something with it. Because the other thing is, if you do have a digital twin of your business, you'll probably be overwhelmed with all of that data. And so you want to make sure that you have a sophisticated approach to making value out of the data. So that's one piece of it. The second piece of it, and we probably can't go without saying the two most famous letters of today's technology world, AI, artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence in particular is taking lots of data and taking patterns and then figuring out what to do with it, right? Whether it's in machine learning, whether it's large language models that we use for these chatbots that many of us use probably on a daily basis now. That's all formed by the core data that's in the system, and so the unlocking of new capabilities also requires really, really strong data readiness to be able to take advantage of. So I think there's a historical part, which is that digital twin, and then it's the go forward capabilities that artificial intelligence will give employees how to take advantage of that data.
Yeah, good stuff. And it's one of those things, a necessary evil in these projects, right? Because you can get all caught up in the cool bells and whistles of the technology itself, of the software application itself. And I know, Ralph, you mentioned that Acumatica was just, for you guys, it was easier to use. It looked nicer, easier to navigate. But if that system doesn't have good data behind it, it doesn't matter how good it looks or how well it works on the surface. So here's a couple questions I want to get to here from the audience. First of all, I'll say hello to Fatima joining from Egypt. But here's a question. I think this is probably more for you, Sanket, about, this is from Sanjay on LinkedIn. Sanjay says, do you think operational inefficiencies and issues of legacy systems is helping more companies modernize their ERP systems? Are you seeing, like, from your vendor perspective, are you seeing more organizations that are saying, hey, we've got all these operational inefficiencies, these legacy systems are hamstringing us? I know Ralph painted a good picture of what he was experiencing with Mass 90 and why they decided to go on this modernization journey. Is that typically the impetus or the driver, or what are the biggest drivers for someone wanting to swap out their ERP system?
Yeah, I think it's three things. At the very broadest level. Number one, when I talk to customers that are moving from legacy into a modern ERP, the first thing will be, in some cases there's a change in ownership, or it's a family business, and younger folks are coming into the business, and the first question is, why can't I get all this data on my phone?
Right.
And try getting legacy ERP data on your phone. Or why can't I approve this purchase order? Or why can't I see what the shipments are today? Or why can't I get a daily balance sheet or P&L statement or cash? Can't do that in an old system. And so very simply, folks who've been, spent most of their time on a phone or moving around, as Ralph started traveling, going to figure stuff out, the requirements become like, hey, you can't meet my requirements of what I need to do my job. And so this system is holding me back. So that tends to be one thing. The second thing is the customer requirements. Customers are like, I want to know, what I'm ordering, what the price is, when it's going to come. I want transparency through the whole system. And a lot of those legacy systems can't do that. They can connect to stuff, but they can't provide real-time access and information, because it's probably sitting on someone's PC and maybe it's off. It's not working, or it's a server that's behind some firewall you can't get access to. And so those are just simple requirements. And if you're not able to do that, you're not able to compete, you're going to probably be left behind. And then the last thing Ralph was talking about, he wanted, a system that could access anywhere, but also had big security. That's another thing. We've seen a number of customers recently come to us using legacy systems where all of their data was held hostage by hackers. And, people think, oh, I've got my system, behind in my basement somewhere in my warehouse. Yeah, that's probably the easiest thing to hack. And so, that we've seen people get their businesses completely shut down because they aren't in a fully compliant, secure environment with all the security elements that you need. And you need people paying attention daily because the vectors of security are growing every day. And if you're not smart on that, you're going to have problems. And so you need to make sure that whoever you're getting your software from is thinking about that and helping protect, the company's data. So I think those are three things that we see very commonly as compelling events for people to move on to new tech.
Yeah. And as you were describing your situation, Ralph, your legacy situation, it reminded me of a common theme I've been thinking about lately when it comes to user adoption that is when you start looking at entry level employees, especially if they're younger, 25, 30-year-old people that grew up with social media. And to your point, Sanket, it was on their phones. You try to imagine a world where they're going to come into your company now and you're going to teach them Mass 90, or you're going to teach them like an old green screen system, and they're just not going to have any idea what, you can't even comprehend it. It doesn't make sense. For me, it does, because I grew up, when I came up in the tech world, that's what, I saw green screens. I knew what a transaction code was. I knew how it works, but no offense to the younger people, but they just didn't need to grow up in that environment. And so as we age as a society, you're going to have more and more of those kids, and soon they won't be kids, obviously, but they'll be older like us, and they'll not even know how to use these sorts of systems. So that learning curve, I imagine, is pretty important especially if you have attrition or you're bringing in new people, entry-level people. You're going to need something that's easy to grow with like that.
No, we've seen a big difference in like the new hires, especially the younger new hires. The training is much, much faster. We would take 4 or 5 weeks to feel comfortable with a new CSR in our old system, where now about a week. And we had better tools and processes, but it's just so much more natural to them. Like something sometimes when someone annoys me, I was like, you don't need instructions to use Facebook. Click around and figure it out. Because you can for Acumatica, right? Like Sage, I needed to have like some documented click here, and click here. Acumatica is not 100% intuitive like Facebook, but kind of, some of it is. So like, that was a huge change for us, being on a modern user interface, is because you don't need an instruction manual again for social media accounts. I never had to look at how to use Amazon. You don't really have to do that on Acumatica. You have to get trained on what the heck you're seeing on the screen, but to get to the screens, it doesn't take anywhere near the same level of training.
Yeah. That's very true. I mean, even your phone, you get a new phone. It's not like I don't even know I don't think I got a manual. I don't think they give you a manual. You just turn it on, you just start using it. And there's always stuff you're like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. That's cool.
Yeah.
but you learn it over time, and use a company and use a team can build that, what you want them to learn and what you want to make sure they know about the system. But it's not because it's not intuitive. It's just you want to show them some of the features and that sort of thing. That's a different learning curve for sure than just trying to figure out the basics and that being difficult. Yeah. So here's a question for you, Ralph, on LinkedIn. This is from Darian. If you had to do the migration again, what would you do earlier in the process to avoid pain later? So like if you could just sort of resequence the way you went about rolling out Acumatica, was there anything you would say, you know what, if I could go back and do that differently, I would?
It could be because of my own ignorance of having just done it for Eastman, but I think we've been pretty successful getting that many companies switched over in 3 years. And it's kind of phased, like some companies move over their sales and finance first, but then manufacturing doesn't come over until later. So there's different ways that we did different companies. I think what I would change management of your existing employees is such a huge piece of changing to an ERP system. So I would say, if anything, just setting expectations to my employees even more than I did. I said, this is going to be tough. This is going to be difficult. Human nature. I gave you guys the training modules. You didn't do them. Don't come. There's a little friction that happens when you switch over, for sure. But being even more upfront with the sales staff and the customers. Certain parts of the business are a little less good at doing the trainings and not showing up on day one and going, where'd all my buttons go? So talking to those departments more before and saying, look, it's really going to be bad for probably months. You're going to be completely behind. Everything that you do intuitively is gone. So you really need to be ready to start clicking buttons and learning what this stuff does. I can't show you what everything does on every screen before day one. You're going to have to be willing to learn a new system and do some of it on your own, because we're going to be trying to figure out how to get our first shipments out. I don't care about your sales goal today. We'll get it back up. We'll build everything back up. One thing that we did is I did not, in the same way we didn't want to recreate our old system with data, I didn't want to create our old reporting. So I did very little, very, very, very little report customization before we started, because I didn't want to just recreate what we had in the past. I said, click the buttons in the system. If you get to the point where you say, I can't figure out how to do something, you need to tell me first what you did, what reports you tried, what inquiries you tried in Acumatica before I'm going to even help you. Not the finance side. Those guys need help, right? Like, we definitely need we got all of our financial reports done, our P&L and our balance sheets and things like that. But as far as like, what are the sales in my territory? Figure it out. And then because then I get a list of the gaps. Okay, now we could build out some inquiries. And so within 2 months, 3 months, we had a lot of things that we were able to go back to our partner Integrated System Solutions. And hey, Troy, I need some reports done. So can you start working on some of these things? Yeah, okay. Here's the gaps. But that way I wasn't just giving them a laundry list of this is everything that's broken now. So kind of answering the question, but also kind of not, it's not just what I would do before. Also what I would do differently during the initial launch is really having people understand this is going to be painful, but we'll get past it. And if we're just, we're systematic about it, we don't freak out, we don't act like the sky's falling, we come up with a list of common things that are missing, we could get those replaced relatively quickly. And we did. It's just people were it was also after COVID, the supply chain issues with COVID, because this was the end of 2022. So we were dealing with that. We were dealing crazy amounts of products finally coming through the long line of containers. So we had multiple things going on at the time to make it difficult, but there's never going to be a good time. Just do it. It's really ripping the Band-Aid off. I just really want people to understand we're really ripping the Band-Aid off. And if you didn't do your homework, it's going to be painful for you, but we'll get through it.
Yeah. And I think it's also important. That's a great point. It's a great way to look at it. And I think another lesson for those listening that might be about to embark on a similar journey is not only is it painful, but that it's normal to be painful. I think that's the other thing is it's like, hey, this isn't painful just because I'm screwing everything up and I'm trying to make it painful for you. So get ready. It's more, these projects are just difficult. I mean, they aren't easy. We're going to try and make it less difficult. And we're doing all the things we can to mitigate risk and to make adoption easier and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, they just are difficult. We're going through a big change, especially for a company that's grown as much as you have. And like you said, you had other fish to fry at the same time. You're trying to implement new technology, which is true for most organizations too. So here's a question from the audience I want to ask you, Sanket. This is from, it sounds like someone who's in the Acumatica ecosystem. This is from Rahim. Rahim says, I'm new to Acumatica and curious about its real world applications. Could you share which industries are currently leveraging Acumatica and how it might be relevant for someone working in the pharmaceutical sector? So maybe you could talk a little bit just about what industries do you see most commonly with Acumatica, or what industries are most likely to want to gravitate towards Acumatica?
Yeah, so we have a number of different, we have products and we have industry editions associated with our products, which have a collection of modules that are pre-configured and operate for specific industries. And that's all in one singular code base. You can actually turn modules on and off in order to meet the needs of the specific industries that you're in based on the modules that you might need. So our packages include distribution, manufacturing, construction, retail, and professional services. So those are the 5 different industry edition packages that we operate in. And it's in terms of the pharmaceutical industry, our manufacturing edition primarily focuses out of the box with discrete manufacturing, and so we work really well with medical device companies and those kind of things. But to answer the other question, we do actually have a partner of ours that's built a process manufacturing module that sits on top of Acumatica that can support pharmaceutical companies. So we do have some pharmaceutical customers that are out there that are, building different drugs and all different elements, but that relates to a third-party module that actually connects to Acumatica for those requirements.
Is that common in the Acumatica space to have the third-party developers or vendors that are creating, variations or modules for Acumatica?
We do. We actually, what's really nice is that a lot of, like, if I just take manufacturing, for example, in manufacturing, even in discrete, we have a number of partners out there that have built modules that sit on top of Acumatica that are on our code base and actually integrate sort of natively with the product for very specific industries. So like we have, a partner that does stuff for just folks who operate in the garage door industry. We have folks who have built modules that's important for automotive manufacturers, people who make modules for automotive companies. We have others that are focused in cannabis, right? So there's all these different areas, and they've taken the base platform of Acumatica, they use our SDK that's broadly available, and then they build these modules on top for what I would call verticals inside of those industries. So if you take manufacturing, there's hundreds of sub verticals inside of those, and many of our partners have built specific modules that sits on top of Acumatica to fill that last mile gap of the functionality that's required.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool. Actually, I didn't realize that about Acumatica, so that's good to know. And so you depending on what industry or functional need you have, there's different variations that still use the core product the way it was built out of the box, but you're extending it or applying it to a different use case depending on the industry or function.
That's right.
Yeah, even I mean, we don't have anything that for the manufacturing side, but we use the Shopify integration, and it's pretty seamless. It's really seamless.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so that's the other part. Not only do we do that, but then we also have these integrations with third-party systems. So whether it's Shopify or BigCommerce or Amazon, or there's other that's on the retail side. There's others that we do in different parts of functionality. A lot of our customers need those other pieces, so we provide that as well.
Yeah, very good. So Ralph, so far I know it's early in your post implementation journey, and it's an ongoing journey, of course, but what sorts of business value, business benefits have you seen since you've started using Acumatica?
I mean, I think I'm correct in saying the ERP systems are initially based off of financials, right? So like it really, it's Sanket. I like your twin idea. The analogy I use is virtual versus physical, talking to the warehouse people. You're doing virtual, you got to make the virtual match the physical. So if you move a box, move the box in the system as well, right? Like you need to do that
exactly,
or else the data's wrong. So this is what helped me through my journey personally. Going back to a question that was earlier, and then to get to your question now, Eric, is I learned a lot more about finance. I really am a saxophone player. I didn't go to accounting school. I don't always remember if it's credit or a debit, depending on what type of transaction it is, but I understand the concept, right? I understand what GLs are, and I understand how a balance sheet and a P&L or a statement work. So learning that type of thing really helped me get to a point to where I was able to then take all the processes in Acumatica and figure out, okay, how does that relate to accounting? How does that relate to accounting? How does that relate to accounting? So by doing all that work, I was able to, oh my goodness, what was the question?
The business value or the business
Went on
benefit.
a tangent. Right. So the business value. So it's all to our finance team. So really the one piece of our business that is the most global is our finance team. So I have 6 or 7 accounting people that manage all the accounting for the world. We do have separate in China. We do have a little bit different in Europe, but we are able to centralize a lot of our more big picture business processes, accounting being a huge one, right? And then I mentioned earlier, I've added a product data specialist. So we do have 3 different tenants. So I have to keep 3 different sets of records of items updated, but it's pretty easy when we could basically copy and paste the information from one to the other and add attributes. So there are bigger pictures, bigger pieces that I'm able to add as a global support for all these other companies rather than them having to do it themselves. You guys got a new product line launch? Great. Give us the data. We'll get it updated in the system. We can add attributes, and now it just plug and play to our existing generic inquiries. That's the report writing, the inquiry tool for Acumatica, the basic reporting tool that we have. So we could write generic inquiries, and now we get a new company, we start a new product line, whatever it is, it just plug and play into the existing structure that we already have. That it doesn't feel like I'm having to reinvent the wheel every time something new comes up. We just ingest it and let it fit within the ecosystem that we've been able to create. So I have a product data specialist. I have a reporting engineer, as I mentioned earlier. So this guy can help everyone in the company because we have one singular program and it's all built on the same structure. We've structured our data to fit within Acumatica's structure. So it's very easy for us to have anyone in the world reach out to them. Hey, I really need something that does this. Oh yeah, I already have that for this company. Let me just copy and paste the data, change a couple of parameters and conditions. There you go. Now you have it. So that's been a huge benefit for us, for the ability to kind of centrally manage the tools that everyone needs to use. We're not like dictating how they use it. We're just saying, all right, here's the tools you guys have. You tell us what you're missing and we'll create it for you. So for me and my team to be able to do that globally is huge.
Yeah, very cool. Well, that's good. It's impressive. You're already seeing value and benefits. I'm sure over time you'll continue to optimize and figure out better ways to continue using some of the new features and functions, especially as they release new features and functions to you. So I guess I'll leave the final word to you, Sanket, or the final question I have for you here today, which is, looking ahead, where do you see ERP going, especially with AI, predictive analytics, all that stuff? Where do you see ERP headed as it relates to the mid-market here where you guys play?
Yeah, I think it's a broad piece. I'll just sort of share where I think are the 3 places we're investing in, because I think those become important elements. I think number 1, Ralph talked about this usability. At the end of the day, if the tool is not usable, people can't get to what they need to do their jobs. What's the point? So we're continuing to invest in usability, make things easier to find, get the right information to take action. That's number 1. Number 2 is continuing to improve and increase the business process functionality. So we look really carefully, like, do we have in the box all the things that all our customers need, depending upon what industry they're in? And so we're continuing to invest in that on a regular basis. And then third is definitely the artificial intelligence piece. And I think there's a couple dimensions to this. One is, augmenting the capabilities for humans to do their job. So one person can do a lot more work. And then the second is, how much can the system do by itself, so that a human doesn't need to be involved. And at the end of the day, that's all just about productivity. And so I think a lot of different elements in terms of advisors or agents that can automate stuff and make things better for people is sort of where we're investing, while we obviously keep all of our customers' data absolutely secure. That's the number 1 requirement. So those are the 3 things we're investing in.
Right. Very cool. Well, I appreciate you guys being here today and sharing all of your experiences so far, Ralph and Sanket. Your perspective as a vendor is always helpful as well. Again, if you want to learn, the listeners want to learn more about Acumatica, you can scan this QR code right here that you see on the screen. I'll drop it in the chat as well if you aren't able to scan that for whatever reason. Perhaps you haven't been taught how to use that on your phone. Back to our point earlier. If you don't know how to scan on a phone, I'll include a link below. To just help out there. But you can not only learn more about Acumatica, but you can also get a 15% discount if you decide to subscribe to it later. So be sure to check that out. And we'll polish this episode or this discussion up. We'll add some additional content. It'll be released as an official episode of Transformation Ground Control that'll get released next week. Every Wednesday, we release new episodes of this podcast. So go to transformationgroundcontrol.com and you can see this interview in its entirety along with other content related to it next week. So I want to thank you all for your time. We'll see you next time, same place. Have a great week in the meantime.